23 years ago this week on June 14th, 1998, WCW presented the Great American Bash from Baltimore, Maryland. If you were to stop watching this show after Goldberg picked up the 100th victory of his career over Conan, you would think this was a very good show. You might even think this was an excellent show. Unfortunately, there were 3 matches that came after that. Booker T beat Chris Benoit to win their best of 7 series and then went on to beat Fit Finlay later in the night to win the WCW television title. Chris Kanyon defeated Perry Saturn. Very good stuff. As was Chris Jericho against Dean Malenko. Juventud Guerrera against Reese. Not so much. With a horribly botched Hurricane Rana finish. But then Goldberg, hot as he was at the time, and he was white hot, beat Conan to move to 100-0. But then came Bret Hart and Hollywood Hogan beating Roddy Piper and Randy Savage, who had no business being in the ring as Savage needed reconstructive knee surgery. So, of course, he wrestled not 1, but 2 matches. He wrestled twice in a row. After he and Piper lost, they wrestled each other, and Savage lost again. He lost both matches by submission. And he didn't wrestle again until the following year. I think he actually might have had both knees operated on. And in the main event, Sting beat the Giant, get this, in a singles match for control of the tag team titles. Sting and Giant had won the belts. Giant was part of the NWO Black and White squad. Sting declined to, join the Black and White. He ended up being part of the Wolfpack, Red and Black. Giant then tried to replace Sting, the wrestler, not the singer, with Bryan Adams. Again, the wrestler, not the singer. Now that I think about it, WCW missed a huge opportunity for a celebrity tag team match with Sting and Bryan Adams against Sting and Bryan Adams. 24 hours later, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker fought Kane and Mankind to a no contest in the first ever Hell in a Cell match to take place on Monday Night Raw. It was only the second ever Hell in a Cell match, period, but the first to air on television, which is appropriate given that we just had Roman Reigns against Rey Mysterio on SmackDown Friday night in the first Hell in a Cell match ever on SmackDown, and the first one to ever air on network television. This episode also gave us the first ever tag team Royal Rumble match, with the winners becoming number 1 contenders to the tag team titles, which was won by Kane and Mankind. So those two made history twice that night. 20 years ago this week, on the June 18th, 2001 episode of Raw is War, the big reveal of the creep who had been stalking The Undertaker and his then-wife, Sara. Probably not a wise move to get your wife's name tattooed across your Adam's apple. Especially if you're The Undertaker. He had already been divorced once before. I mean, you hope for the best, but you have to know that if it happened once, it could happen again. I don't know of all the places on your body why you would think it's a good idea to tattoo this woman's name across your neck like that, but to each their own. These segments had started airing on television, showing some mysterious person with his voice distorted, watching Sara Undertaker, her every move. He was eavesdropping on her during the day, sometimes in the evening, showing her on her exercise bike, in the backyard playing with their dog. He was even in their house at one point going through her panties. The distorted voice was Vince McMahon. Somebody at the time had slowed the audio down and uploaded it online. I remember this being a really big deal in the community of internet fans at that time. Finally, though, it was time for the big reveal. The person rode down to the ring on a motorcycle, just like The Undertaker did at that time. He was wearing a black trench coat and a ski mask. We couldn't see who it was. And he stood in the middle of the ring. The lights went dark. And then the lights came on. And we see this, basically this disguised, hooded figure in the ring. And he reaches up into the air and he reaches down slowly. And yanks the mask off his head to reveal Diamond Dallas Page. 3-time WCW champion Diamond Dallas Page, who said that he went after The Undertaker because he was the top dog, and that's what you do to make yourself famous. Now, that explanation actually is not a bad one to run with, that he was only doing it to get in Undertaker's head and play mind games and get under his skin. You know, he doesn't care about Sara. You know, he's got fucking Kimberly at home. What does he need Sara for? But they continued to lean into the stalking stuff. I remember DDP had a shrine built to her. This is after he was already revealed. Just complete garbage. This whole thing was fucking garbage. The invasion was just botched beyond belief, and so was DDP in WWE. And as usual, Bruce Prichard is so far up his own ass. In every clip I've ever heard of him discussing this, I swear to God, he could give himself a free colonoscopy without having to bill his insurance company. He claims DDP was never going to get over in WWE. Yet, if you watch this reveal, it was the only highlight of this entire angle. The reaction he got that night was huge. He absolutely came across like a star. I know this is going to come as a shock to a lot of you, but Bruce Prichard is full of shit. In WCW, DDP, he was the baby face for the people, right? They called themselves the People's Champion. So what do? They turn him into a fucking peeping Tom. And the saddest part of this whole run there was that he was one of only 2 big names from WCW who actually cared enough to want to be there. It was DDP and Booker T. Those 2 guys gave up a lot of money, a lot of guaranteed money, to get out of their contracts with Turner to come work for Vince McMahon. And age played a factor as well. DDP told Gary Cassidy of Inside the Ropes that, look, at the time he was 45 years old and he was not getting any younger, and he felt that it was a now or never type of thing. But WCW had owed him more than $1.2 million. When he walked away from $487,000 to come work for WWE because he knew that they wanted him. He just didn't know what they wanted him for. It was a far cry from the idea that he had, and I know he's talked about this in numerous interviews before, but you know, his whole thing was doing a People's Champ versus People's Champ angle with The Rock. And I know that he had gotten away from that character towards the end of his run in WCW. He was doing the Jersey Triad stuff. There was a lot of shit that happened at the end of WCW that I think a lot of people would rather forget. The Goldberg heel turn. I mean, we can go down a whole fucking list of dumb shit they did. But it almost doesn't even matter. You know what I mean? Like, you bring him in, trust me, all it would have taken was one promo to set that thing up. And at 45, that would have been the time to do it. You bring him in, you go right for the big match because he's not getting any younger. His body was already breaking down on him. He had injuries were starting to mount. It really was a now or never type of thing. And they were heading into SummerSlam. And you can't tell me that wouldn't have been a great main event or co-main event for SummerSlam in 2001. I think that would have been a fine choice. But it was not to be. And within weeks, DDP was being pinned in the ring on TV by Sara Undertaker. And he and Undertaker, I don't recall them ever having a proper one-on-one match together. Ever. Officially. I wouldn't even call... What happened at the King of the Ring in 01 wasn't even a match. It was a fight. Undertaker came out, beat the fuck out of him. DDP ran away. That was it. I mean, that kind of sums it all up right there. 19 years ago this week, on June 15th, 2002, Major League Wrestling hosted its first ever event called Genesis from Viking Hall, formerly the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, featuring an 8-man single elimination tournament to crown the first ever MLW champion as they tried to recreate the infamous night Shane Douglas won and then threw down the NWA title in that very same building. And out of that, the original angle with Douglas, the Extreme Championship Wrestling title was created. That's pretty much the point, I think, in which it went from Eastern Championship Wrestling to Extreme Championship Wrestling. But this time, here with MLW, it did not get over quite the same way. And it made for a very flat finish when Shane Douglas won the title in a three-way dance against Vampiro and Taio Kea, or Kia, I think it's Kea. Douglas spat on the MLW title, he threw it down, but referee John Finnegan and the local athletic commissioner warned him that he would be fined and suspended for life in the state of Pennsylvania if he did not take the title and defend it. After that, MLW went on hiatus for a few months, and Douglas was stripped of the championship. When MLW returned in September, they ran a show at the Manhattan Center where Satoshi Kojima beat Jerry Lynn, making Kojima, according to Court Bauer, the first officially recognized MLW champion. And Kojima would go on to defend the title in All Japan Pro Wrestling several times. 4 days later, NWA Total Nonstop Action presented its first show live on pay-per-view. This was back during the weekly pay-per-view era, from Huntsville, Alabama. And what a debut show it was. Jeff Jarrett opened with a diatribe about how the Battle Royal to crown a new NWA champion was a really stupid idea. Out comes Ken Shamrock to agree with Jeff Jarrett, saying that the idea sucks. Then Scott Hall comes out from the crowd. He agrees with the both of them. Nothing like burying creative on the very first night to get the fans excited for your big main event. Also on this show, they interviewed a dude by the name of Mortimer Plumtree, who talked about the tag team that he was going to be managing called the Johnsons. Get it? They're a couple of dicks. They wore masks and flesh-colored bodysuits to the ring for their match against James Storm and Psychosis, a tag team I never knew that I needed in my life, but boy do I wish I was able to see more of them together. James Storm and Psychosis. The Battle Royal that I mentioned came down to Ken Shamrock and Malice. I think it turned into a singles match at that point. Ricky Steamboat was the special referee. Shamrock won the title with a belly-to-belly suplex. One last note on this. The first several weekly pay-per-views that TNA ran, they each featured a midget match. One of the more infamous midgets was named Puppet the Psycho Dwarf, who was known for threatening to kill the other midgets. So you see, he wasn't a midget, he was a dwarf. He wanted to murder the midgets. He also, the month after this, pulled a gun on Jeff Jarrett in the middle of the ring. And in another infamous segment, was shown masturbating into a trash can while asking Goldilocks, the interview lady, if she wanted some of his porridge. How that company has managed to survive as long as it has is still a mystery to me. One day after that, I mean, how the fuck do you follow that up? On June 20th, 2002, with the company going through creative woes and its biggest star, Steve Austin, having just walked out, in large part because of what he called the company's piss-poor creative, Vince McMahon decides the only way to fix things is to bring former WCW World Champion Vince Russo back to join the creative team, which lasted all of 2 weeks. But yes, indeed, some people may hear this and may not even be aware of the fact that Vince Russo was brought back. He was rehired by WWE in 2002. Supposedly, Time Warner was paying for Russo's legal fees in the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan brought against him and the company, stemming from the Bash at the Beach incident in the year 2000. And one of the stipulations of them doing so was that he could not work for any other wrestling company. Which means that if that's true, that would mean that Vince McMahon would have had to get Time Warner to waive that restriction so that he could rehire Russo. So think about how awkward that must have been for Hogan when he heard the news, considering the fact that he was back working for WWE at the time. Hogan had just come back a few months earlier, and now you find out with this lawsuit still pending that you brought, that Vince Russo is being brought in to run creative. 24 hours later, Russo met with the creative team, and not even 24 hours after that, he was demoted to the role of creative consultant, basically being paid to sit at home and watch the TV shows. Now, exactly what happened, only those involved really know, but by Russo's own admission, he was not familiar with the product at the time. He did not watch the product at the time on television, and that was said to be a major strike against him. And he was also said to have pitched a new variation of the WCW invasion angle that was not met with a lot of enthusiasm. So it involved Eric Bischoff and Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon. Russo's version of events, or where the blame lies for all that happened, has shifted a bit over the years. And one thing you get from all of these interviews that Russo has given is how very highly he thinks of himself. Here's what he told Ring Rust Radio in 2015, putting the blame on Triple H for things falling apart. I was very disappointed when I almost went back to WWE in 2002 and found out more or less Triple H was not in my corner after all that I did for him. Fast forward 12 years later and you see the position that he is in and that Stephanie is in. And now it all makes sense. Makes all the sense in the world. If you eventually want the power, then you want to keep a guy away like a Vince Russo from a creative standpoint who is going to produce a better TV show, better content than you can. A Vince Russo is a better writer and went to school for writing to be a writer. Holy shit. If he went to school for writing, he must have missed the lesson on redundancy. He went to school for writing to be a writer. Really? I would have thought you went to school for writing to be a fucking circus clown. He says, when that happened in 2002 and I learned he was working behind the scenes to keep me out of the WWE, I would be lying to you if I told you my opinion of him did not change. In 2019, this is what he said on the Truth with Consequences podcast. And a hat tip to 411 Mania for the transcript here. So first of all, I can hear the bros, by the way. I can't not hear just bro in my head as I read this. So first of all, I had already laid everything out to Vince. I go into that room, bro. There it is. Bruce is not in the room. He was very upset at this time that Bruce Prichard, I guess maybe on his podcast, was talking about the Russo stuff. Russo says Bruce wasn't even there. He never saw him. He wasn't in any of these meetings. He's very upset about that. But anyway, he says Bruce isn't in the room, so whatever information he's getting secondhand. He wasn't there. I laid out an entire year of programming for that team. They were silent. Their jaws hit the ground. They were dumbfounded, and it became pretty evident to everybody in the room, well, if Vince McMahon hires this guy, there's no need for us. I knew damn well when I left that room, those guys were going to bury me to Vince because of what I had laid out. They couldn't lay out a tenth of that on their best day. And I knew they knew, holy shit, if this guy comes in here, there's no need for us. So they go into protect your spot mode. I knew all of this, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying, Vince, if you want to go with these guys, go with these guys. So I fly home. The whole plane ride, I'm like, this isn't going to work. I knew it wasn't going to work. Sure enough, I get home, and my wife tells me that Vince is trying to... So many Vinces here. My wife tells me that Vince is trying to get a hold of me. It was late in the evening at that point. I spoke to Vince in the morning, and here's where all the holes in the story... Well, there's a period there. I don't know what he was trying to say. Here's what Vince says to me. Vince, this is not going to work out. And here's what I said to Vince. Yeah, Vince. It's like a comedy routine. Let me see if I can simplify this here. Okay, so we have Vince M, and we'll just say Russo and McMahon. How about that? We'll make it easy. I'll alter the words as I go along here in real time. I can multitask. Anyway, he goes, Russo, this is not going to work out. And I said to McMahon, yeah, Vince, it's not going to work out because the minute I left that room, everybody went back to you and buried me and buried my creative, which is exactly what I knew they would do. And I said to McMahon, I'm telling you right now, Vince, you do not have the talent in that room to turn your company around. This is 2002. I said, you do not have the talent in that room to turn the company around. Now, bro, what happens at that point? At that point, bro, Vince is doing his best to keep me on as a consultant. And why is Vince doing that, bro? I'll tell you why, bro. He's doing it because he knows I'm right, and he knows what I'm saying is right. Bro, I did not watch the product leading up to 2002 because the product sucked. I'm not going to sit there and watch a shitty wrestling show. Oh my God, there's irony is dead. Irony is just fucking dead. I'm not going to sit there and watch a shitty wrestling show, says Vince Russo here in this interview. The ratings were going down the toilet. Nobody cared what they were doing. So was I watching the product? Was I smart to the product? No. Here's where it broke down, bro. Vince McMahon hired me without telling Stephanie. And he told Stephanie after he hired me. And the reason why I knew this was not going to work out was because Stephanie was not there in person when I met with him in person in 2002. I had to go in a separate room and talk to her on a speakerphone. And off the bat, Stephanie was treating me like I was her redheaded stepchild. She did not want me there. She was not happy. It was not part of the process. When she hung up the phone, I said, this is not going to work. So now Stephanie is hot. Vince knows Stephanie is hot. Everybody in that room buries me to Vince. Vince tells me things aren't going to work out. All right, enough of this. But you can see how things have shifted. First, it was the fact that Triple H had it out for him. Then he's telling this person here that Stephanie had it out for him. Then he's saying that, no, it was the other creative members who were burying me it was everybody's fault. Anyway, that's his version of events. Russo would not be unemployed for long. A few weeks later, on July 9th, NWA TNA hired Russo in a creative capacity, even though he had secretly been helping them even before that in an unofficial capacity. In fact, he takes credit for coming up with the TNA name, which really stood for tits and ass, not for total nonstop action.